Speak loud.
Oh, that's okay.
Those are Robert. Robert. Hi. How are you? I never know if people recognize you.
Public house.
There she is. I told you.
I was just there the other day.
Oh, were you?
Yeah.
Right. Hello, everybody. I just got back.
Hello. Hello. How you doing?
Hi there, everyone.
Must be Eric. Good.
Good. Thanks for coming.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you all so much for attending Left Bank Books' launch event for Eric von Schroder and his new book, A Universe Disrupted. So for all of you here in person, thank you very much for being here. We also thank you for wearing your mask during the duration of the event. And then for those of you at home on our live stream, thank you very much for being here as well. My name is Evan. I'm a bookseller and the event host here at Left Bank Books. So tonight's event is only possible because of the support of all of you. When you support Left Bank Books and authors like these, your money goes directly into the local economy. It helps us keep your bookstore open. It also helps us keep your streets paved, your libraries funded, your parks free, and so many other things that make St. Louis a better place. So I'd like to thank you all so much for shopping local and supporting this event. We have a few upcoming events that we are excited about, including Pulitzer Prize winning author Andrew Sean Greer in a couple of days on the 23rd. We're also honored to be hosting Congresswoman Cori Bush on October 6th.
Yay!
Woo! All right, so we encourage you to check out our event calendar, left-bank.com, for a full list of all of our programming for readers of all ages. And now for tonight's event. We are so excited to be welcoming St. Louis's own Eric von Schroder, a multi-talented artist. He is a documentary filmmaker, a TV producer, and design consultant, as well as, of course, the author of these books. Though he has since abandoned us for the oceans of California, St. Louis remains ever important to him, and we're so excited to have him back in town and with us. Eric began writing this series by collecting fragments of memory, images, and ideas, and then weaving them together into a story. This series is about what happens when you take a step into the unknown. Tonight's book is called A Universe Disrupted. In book one, main character Billy Bustani had the adventure of a lifetime. Now all he wants to do is go back to the amazing universe he discovered. But the power brokers over there warned him to stay away and keep his mouth shut. At the same time, Dyami Redhawk, an idealistic young man from that universe, has connected with Billy's daughter and is on a mission to build a modern Native American city in our world. But he's getting nowhere until he finds support in unexpected places. A plea for help from the other universe gives Billy his chance to return. He and his wife immerse themselves in the beauty and splendor of this odd, intriguing world. There they encounter dark secrets lurking beyond its surface. Billy, Dyami, and their friends have to make the biggest decision of their lives with the fate of two worlds hanging in their balance. Please join me in welcoming Eric von Schroder.
Evan, you covered the first thing I was going to say, so that was
Good job. Time for more questions later.
yeah. So thank you all for coming, first off. And it really means a lot to have you all here. It means a lot for me to be here. I really would have wanted to have done this 2 years ago when Universalist Travel came out. That was sort of my dream. Read at Left Bank. Obviously, it didn't happen. So we did a Facebook thing from my guest bedroom. But I do want to say many, many thanks to Left Bank Books, which really is a great place, and it's been tremendously and helping us, get these books out. They've done a hell of a job selling them, actually. So I hope it continues. So that's really nice. A couple other thank yous. One, of course, is to my dearest, most wonderful Becky Britton von Schroder. None of this would be here if it weren't for her, because the books wouldn't exist. I don't think I could have done it without her sort of encourage me and say, "Come on, get back to it," and pushing it along. And so, thanks to her. One of the couple other people, well, someone who's not here, but that's fine. One of the things we've done with the first book is doing audiobooks. Anybody heard the audiobook? Listen to it. Yeah, Leslie has. And Gene Ponzi, who's one of the narrators of the audiobook, is here. Also a tremendous supporter of everything I do. So really appreciate all that. I think that's everybody, besides just it's so nice to see so many, I assume, smiling faces. But hopefully we got more good shape on that. And it's really nice to see all your sparkling eyes. And by the way, speaking of sparkling, I didn't say about Becky, is that she has written a really wonderful book called The Art of Sparkling, Share Your Inner Light with the World, which is a beautiful book, little book, not huge, about what she does. And many of you have been sparkled by her. And she's working now on a very important and substantial book called Family Dance, which she's doing. And so we sit at home and she writes on one floor and I write on the other floor, and she works a lot harder than I do. I kind of goof around, but she does not goof around. So, okay, this whole very improbable story and journey for me began about 7 years ago, a little over 7 years ago, when I had a series of dreams over 3 months, 2-3 months, and they kind of like blew me away. They were all dreams where I was standing in places in St. Louis, really specific places like Euclid in Maryland, and where Barnes Hospital is, or South 39th Street, places like that. But I was there and everything was different. Different buildings, different houses, everything was totally different. And I loved these dreams. I bet I had, I don't know, 7 or 8 of them over a period of a few months. And I wrote a lot of them down. A couple of them are on my website, my notes from those days. And that was sort of saying, well, what if, what if there were another version of St. Louis floating out there somewhere? Wouldn't that be cool? So that's kind of what got me going. And I'd never done anything. I never written fiction, a word of fiction in my life. Except maybe some reports in high school that weren't supposed to be fiction. But so I just kind of got it. It's like pulling. You find the little thread in your sweater and you keep pulling, and it just keeps coming out more and more and more. And that's kind of what happened to me. And I had a lot of fun with it, and I realized a couple things. Like probably all of you, I have pretty complicated feelings about St. Louis. It's on one hand, it's a really beautiful place, particularly the older parts. I mean, the suburbs are the suburbs of the neighborhood. But the older parts of St. Louis, to me, where I grew up, around in this neighborhood, totally beautiful. I'm always happy to walk down the street. Euclid's a good one. And you just don't know what's happening. And I just really enjoy that. But at the same time, St. Louis has, in part, there's some pretty ugly aspects to the history of St. Louis, as we all know. It's been pretty rough on a lot of people over the years and the way the city was built. So it's sort of this juxtaposition of sort of beauty and sort of a fade, what has now become kind of a little bit of a faded splendor of the city. Because the city hasn't really turned out the way I think the people back around the turn of the century thought it was going to turn out. I mean, they were all set to become one of the major urban centers of the world. That's what they assumed would happen. Well, obviously, over the last 100 years, it hasn't really worked out that way. It's kind of gone sideways. And I've always felt unhappy about that, and disappointed. And sort of spent a lot of time walking around the city and a lot of time thinking about those stories that I'd read, that I would hear from people about what it was like back then, and how it's not like that now. And it's kind of plainer and lower energy. So when I had these dreams, that sort of sparked this long-term interest I had to say, maybe there could be another way that this city could be. Maybe any city, but St. Louis is the one I know, so that's the one I work with. What would it be like if it were different? And so I started playing around with that. And I thought, and for a while I thought the best way to tell that story was maybe I'm not going to write an urban development, treatise. What happened? What went wrong? Why did it go wrong? What should we do? Because I don't know anything about it. I have no expertise. So I thought, maybe if I write it as a story, and the story about someone from here going there to this place that kind of could exist. And so that's kind of what got me going. And I wanted it to be something kind of light, because that's maybe my personality, and kind of funny and a little silly in some ways, and kind of try to describe something very absurd in kind of a deadpan style, And I thought about how would an average regular person, what would they do? What do you do when the most inexplicable thing that you could ever imagine happens to you? How do you deal with it? What do you do? I thought, that's cool. One, I always wish stuff like that would happen to me. So I thought, well, that's the story. So that was my first character, Billy Bastani. I thought, I'll tell the story through his eyes. And he's someone who is a little confused a lot, and kind of looking for a good time, wanting to have fun, and he's in this thing that's like earth-shattering and totally upends all of science and everything, and he's thinking, wow, that sounds like I got invited to a cool party. That'll be great. So I really like that aspect of it. How does one discover or deal with a totally bizarre discovery when it happens to you? The other thing that are in these books, and most of you haven't read Disrupted yet, but it's a sequel, so it's kind of a continuation of the same story. There's some new characters, but most of the original characters are still there. It's like a year later, and they're dealing with what they're dealing with, and things happen. But the other thing that I really had fun with is as the story was unfolding for me, and I'm a very undisciplined writer, so it all came in little dribs and drabs here and there that I sort of, as Evan said, I had to sort of piece together. But the other thing that I was really interested in was, how do you create? I wanted to create what I call kind of a new mythology for St. Louis. A story. A new story. Because a lot of times in a city or a place, it's about the stories people there tell themselves about what this place is like, how it came to be the way it is, why it's this way and not another way. So, and I always thought there's some really cool stories around St. Louis, as most of you probably know, but also, St. Louis, sometimes it's a little thin. So I thought, I'm going to make up my own stories about this other city and the background and how it got there and why it is the way it is, and try to have fun with it. And I did that in the first one. If you remember the character, Jim Hines, who was the stockbroker in the 1920s, voiced by Miss Ponzi, who somehow ends up there and turns it in, and he becomes the architect of the whole growth of the city. He becomes this whole thing, and he's a character I had a lot of fun with, because he's kind of a rascal. He's kind of he's forward looking, but also he's kind of out for himself, and he doesn't really, but he's brilliant. But his story behind there, and his story is in the first book, in part to be able to explain to the reader, well, how the hell did this place get like that Billy's seeing? It's like, a megalopolis. How'd that happen? Well, Jim Hines was a kind of a fun way to kind of set that up, and I hope you enjoyed that. So in this, what I'm going to read you two passages tonight from Universe Disrupted. One kind of focuses on this whole question of, what do you do when you encounter something that cannot be explained. How do you deal with that? And in kind of a hopefully fun and right way. And the second passage is going to be a mythology story. That's new to the second book. In the second book, as you'll see, I've invented a whole new neighborhood, which we'll talk about when we get to that. So that's what I'd like to do. I hope I don't bore you to death. Sit back and, take it in, enjoy it, and we'll do that. Probably it's like 15 minutes between the two of them, So, but I'll stop after the first one and set the second one up, and then I hope you have questions, because I don't want to know your opinion. I'm really curious to know what you think and what questions you have. So, to set the scene, you may recall, if you read the first book, that at the end of the first book, two things happened. One, Billy, his wife Carol, his daughter Meredith, who had been kidnapped over in the other world by the evil knights of the Carnelian. Whoever they could be modeled on. But they get sprung out. They get someone who's friendly to them makes a deal so they can come home instead of have to spend the rest of their lives there. And but the condition of the deal is you can never breathe a word of any of this to anybody under any circumstances for any reason. Okay, so they accept that. But when they come back over here, Meredith had met this guy, never mentioned Diane Redhawk, who was from the Native American, spectacular Native American city in HD of Cahokia, which is a thriving, beautiful city of all mostly Native Americans with their culture, and it's like no place. I mean, when Billy, he thought HD St. Louis is pretty damn cool until he went to Cahokia, and then he was like, oh my God, what the hell is this? So Diane, who his daughter strikes up a relationship with over there, decides when he hears what it's like over here in Cahokia, basically, mound covered with grass, nobody around. He goes, that's terrible. We need to have my kind of Cahokia in your world, and I'll come back with you, and I'll make it happen somehow. He's an engineer, so who knows how good he is at this. Well, he finds out early in the story, the second book, he's trying to put this together because it's his dream. He's finding that it's a lot harder than he thought it would be. He finds out a lot of people, not that many people are really, they travel around Oklahoma and Dakotas to Indian reservations and Indian communities, gives a lot of talks, doesn't get a lot of response. No one seems, the people kind of go, huh? What are you talking about? Then a couple things happen, which you have to read the book to find out what they are. But one of them is that at some point he meets a guy. They meet a guy who may be someone who really helped them, who was this Native American, very high-powered Native American lawyer, represents, tribal corporations and casinos and negotiates deals in Washington and does all this stuff. And he, by accident, shows up at one of their places. And he's pretty intrigued. He thinks that sounds kind of cool. So he talks to him. But at the same time, he's very perceptive. And he notices that Diane is a little odd. Okay? Diane is odd for a bunch of reasons. One is sometimes when he speaks, he'll use words that are like not normal English words. He'll have a turn of phrase that you've never heard before. Well, he grew up in another world. They don't speak the same. For example, Diane's telling him, yeah, I really wish we had a retractor on our pickup truck. And then Meredith, who knows this, goes, oh, that's called a sunroof. Oh, yeah, sunroof. I wish we had a sunroof. But Stan picks this kind of stuff up. And so, and he also notices that he's a big talker and he loves to tell jokes and stuff like that. And Diane doesn't get along. You know, doesn't get anything that's like pop culture. He doesn't know anything about it. So he is really intrigued by what they're doing, but he's a little suspicious. And that's the scene. That's the situation that we're going to start with. Because so Stan had business in St. Louis and said, okay, well, show me this Cahokia place. So they come one day to Cahokia and they go up on top of Monk's Mound, and Diamond's telling him, well, it could be like this and it could be like that. Because Diamond hasn't told him the real story yet, right? So then they're coming down. So here I go. Stan, Diami, and Meredith began to walk down the long staircase towards the base of Monk's Mound. Stan couldn't contain his doubts any longer. Best to get them out in the open. Sorry, but your story doesn't add up. What are you not telling me? Nothing. We're trying to get Cahokia off the ground. Meredith sensed the challenge and stepped in. Is something the matter, Stan? I like this Cahokia idea and I want to work with you guys, but I need to be comfortable that I'm not getting mixed up in a cult. Our people have been scammed for centuries, mostly by whites. Stan gave Meredith a sharp look, but also by Indians. And so maybe you want to be a messiah. That's fine. But are you Sitting Bull or Charles Manson? Stan saw the blank look on Diami's face at Manson's name. He had no idea who that was. They reached the bottom of the staircase. Diami stopped, took a moment to calm himself. You're right. There is more. But if I told you, you wouldn't believe me. Try me. Meredith stepped in again. Not now. Give us some time. How about tomorrow? Okay, but it better be fucking good. That night, Meredith and Diami had an emergency meeting with Billy and Carol. What should they tell Stan? Billy didn't want them to say anything. The family had kept the secret, the Knights had left them alone, so why mess that up? Carol pointed out that Stan's help might be the key to getting the new Cahokia going. Based on what Diami and Meredith said about him, she was ready to trust him. Billy saw Meredith's plaintive look. What dad could resist his daughter. If the others were willing to take this chance, he could too. He knew that Cahokia was a big deal. Okay, invite him here for dinner tomorrow. I want to meet him. If I'm comfortable, we'll tell him, though I have no clue how that will go. Stan stood outside the Pelican Building, looking up at the huge metal birds that hovered above the roof. What kind of evening is this going to be? Billy had bought the building that had the old Pelican restaurant, Grand the Shenandoah, which figures in the first book, but he bought it. And he was tired of living in West County, and so he bought it, and then he had this big sculpture of two pelicans put on the roof. It's kind of nuts, but that's what he wanted to do. So that's where they're living at. So inside, Meredith's parents appeared to be perfectly normal, no cultish or fanatical vibe. Her father was charming and funny. He got every one of Stan's pop culture references. Her mother asked a lot of questions about Stan's background and education. She wasn't grilling him. She seemed to be genuinely interested. For a school teacher, she had a decent grasp of basic legal concepts. Billy brought out lamb kebabs, couscous, and salad for dinner. Stan relaxed and began to enjoy himself. Still, he was waiting for the promised revelation of Diami's secret. The pleasant conversation continued. After Stan told a particularly funny story, Billy nodded to Carol. She pushed a $1 bill across the table to Stan. Here's a retainer. You represent us now, so everything we say is covered by attorney-client privilege. Billy refilled Stan's water glass. Stan, what do you know about neutrinos? Nothing that I'm aware of. Well, neutrinos are subatomic particles with no charge. Their mass is so tiny to be practically zero. Trillions of neutrinos pass through your body every second, and you don't notice them, but they're every bit as real as you are. Okay, so what? The same principle applies applies to more than neutrinos. Billy asked Stan to imagine a whole world intertwined with ours, but completely undetectable most of the time. How is it separated? Well, images and metaphors can't do it justice. Billy explained his membrane theory, a diaphanous membrane is everywhere, and his carousel theory, millions of carousels spinning in unison. Maybe both theories are true, maybe neither. Take your pick. But I'm telling you that this other world is absolutely real. We've been there, and I grew up there, he said. Billy, Carol, and Meredith and Diane were all eager to tell Stan about the two worlds. They got so excited that their words piled up on top of each other. They hadn't spoken to anyone about this in the months since the original events. It was a relief to lift the burden of secrecy. Stan wasn't so sure he wanted to be on the receiving end of their pent-up enthusiasm. But it was one hell of a story. Stan was moved when Diane explained that the new Cahokia already existed fully, and that he had made it his mission to bring it to the Indians of this bleak world. You gave up everything and everyone you knew? Stan asked. I heard the calls from the spirits. I could not ignore them. Carol showed Stan a few artifacts supposedly brought back from this other world. Beer coasters, books, and postcards. Meredith cleared the table and Diane unrolled maps and architectural plans and engineering drawings of the fabled Cahokia, including elevations of the Temple of the Children, a huge glass pyramid with museums, offices, and a high school inside. Stan could hardly believe his eyes. He pressed them about the possibility of taking people to the other world, or HD, as Billy called it. Wouldn't that be the best way to prove it was real? Billy assured him they'd considered every angle and they knew of no way to cross over again. He also explained about the knights and their threats to keep visitors out at all costs. Stan's head was spinning. He didn't know what to make of these people. They were either A, fantastic liars with wild imaginations, B, seriously delusional, suffering from some kind of group hallucination, or C, telling the truth. Now, option C seemed to be the least likely, even though their consistent, detailed story about another world that overlaid our own, and which already had a shining, spectacular Cahokia, was the most amazing thing he had ever heard. As the night wore on, Stan was running out of ways to dismiss this far-fetched tale. All of this could be fake, but why would they go through so much trouble? When they said goodbye to Stan on the sidewalk in front of the Pelican building, Diane and Meredith advised him to take time to digest everything. They would check in with him in a few days. Billy thanked him for coming and said he looked forward to seeing him again. Carol gave him a hug and whispered in his ears, remember, attorney, client, privilege. As you can imagine, that's not the last we're going to hear from Stan. Okay. The other thing I want to read about is a different part, and it's totally different, I think. And I hope you enjoyed this also. But it's where I was talking about creating this mythology of St. Louis, this ultimate mythology. What would that be like? So, first book takes place mostly South Grand, South City, downtown Cahokia, places like that. So in this book, I made up a new neighborhood, and it's in North St. Louis. It's up by where the Grand Avenue Water Tower, the big white Corinthian column, which, when you think about it, is the strangest damn thing you could imagine. And it's up there. And sadly, if you've been up there at all in the last 10 years or so, it's basically in the middle of a wasteland. Most of the houses, all of the buildings near there have been taken down. I mean, it's like empty lot after empty lot after empty lot. I think it's very sad. So Obviously, we know there are a lot of reasons why that's true, but that's what happened. So I made up a new neighborhood in HD in that part of town. It's called Seven Wonders. You can look and find out why it's called Seven Wonders, but that's what it's called. So Billy and Carol have found their way back to HD, and they're staying with staying in the home of a character from the first book, Leonora Matsui, if you remember her. She was the young woman who befriended the TV repairman John Little in the first book. But this is years later, and she's doing some very important stuff and needed some help. And one way or another, she got hold of them, crossed the barrier. And they've come to HD to help her on this very important project, big project. And they needed some expertise that they didn't have. And they had run across this young woman who was a very brilliant, in our world, who was a very brilliant mathematician. Her name is Lisa. So they convinced Lisa to come with them. Well, obviously her mind's pretty blown, when she figures out what's going on and where she is. But she's working real hard, and she kind of wants to have a good time. And so they're out one day walking around, and they see a poster on the street. It says, "Come to the Seven Wonders Water Festival." And she really wants to go to that. And the question is, well, what is the water festival? So they're sitting at dinner one night in Leonora's house, and she asks the question. That evening, Lisa asked, "What's the water festival all about?" Leonora told everyone to refill their glasses of wine, and then she told the story. The Seven Wonders neighborhood grew by leaps and bounds in the 1930s after the establishment of the CSP, the economic plan that our friend Jim Hines had come up with. Guaranteed income and all kinds of stuff like that. A polyglot mix of bohemians, artists, and assorted oddballs poured in from all over. Seven Wonders quickly became known as the place where dreams were born, where rules were meant to be broken, and where revelry and mirth could erupt on a moment's notice. One of the immigrants attached to the Bohemian enclave was a young writer and theater director who fancied himself to be the second coming of Shakespeare. He was known as Overflowing Wells. People in Seven Wonders made a sport of giving out humorous nicknames, and Wells got his because he never stopped talking about himself and his grandiose ideas. His real first name was Orson. He wandered the streets of Seven Wonders declaiming soliloquies in a bellowing voice. One day, he found a partner, a handsome young man from a wealthy St. Louis family who was also obsessed with art and theater. His name was Bryce. Because of his money background, the jokesters in the neighborhood dubbed him Twice the Price. "He's in all the scary movies," Lisa said. "Well, Orson Welles was kind of a big deal too," Billy said. Lisa shrugged. She'd never heard of him. Leonora continued. The two theater fiends were a perfect match. Welles wanted to direct and Price loved to act. They put on impromptu performances on street corners for anybody who would stop and listen. And in those days, before the advances in air cooling design, the 19th century brick homes were stifling on hot summer days and muggy nights. People gathered outdoors on front stoops and sidewalks to gossip, flirt, sing, and dance. So summer was the perfect time for shows by Street Corner Shakespeare, as Wells and Price called themselves. One evening, a small audience gathered near the Colossus of Rhodes to watch them. Wells had prepared a special dramatic flourish. Price recited the first piece, Coleridge's poem, The Rime of the Ancient Mariner. And when he got to the famous line, "Water, water everywhere, nor any drop to drink," Wells turned a wrench on a fire hydrant. He had borrowed one of the special wrenches from the fire station, and turned the five-sided valve. and water gushed out onto the street. The audience loved it, and soon many were frolicking in the water as Price continued the poem. Others in the neighborhood heard the commotion and joined the fun. The police and fire departments arrived a little later, shut off the hydrant, and arrested Wells and Price, who by then were acting out passages from The Tempest while standing knee-deep in water. At the police station, Price's father, a candy manufacturer, also named Vincent Price, bailed them out and delivered a stern lecture to his son. It had little impact. The next night, Street Corner Shakespeare gave a repeat performance to a larger audience. Overflowing Wells thrilled them by opening another fire hydrant, adding a new meaning to his nickname in the process. Again, they were arrested and then bailed out by the elder Price. On the third night, the crowd filled the entire block. Stern-faced policemen watched from afar, and when Price got to the critical line of the poem, Wells couldn't resist. Somehow, he had managed to get another of the special wrenches, and he unleashed a torrent of water on the audience. In less than a minute, the police arrested him and Price and dispersed the crowd. Price's father was exasperated and declined to bail them out. Let them rot in jail. Carol picked up the story with the history she had read in the J. Whittemore Hines biography. Carol's favorite thing to do when she goes back to HD is read as many books as she can. So the elder Price went to his friend J. Whittemore Hines, managing director of the CSP, to ask for help in dealing with his son, who appeared to be unduly influenced by the rascal Overflowing Wells. And as always, Hines had a solution. The next day, Hines met with the two young theater lovers at police headquarters. He told them that the city would not stand for such foolishness and that they were in serious trouble. He looked in their eyes for signs of remorse, but saw none. So he gave them a choice, using his own flair for the dramatic. Boys, based on the charges against you, you're looking at about a year in jail if you're convicted, as I'm certain you will be. But I'm offering you another option. He slid 2 sealed envelopes across the table, one for each of you. Before you open them, promise me that you will follow my instructions and all charges will be dropped. Overflowing Wells and Twice the Price looked at each other, nodded their agreement, and then opened the envelopes. Wells's envelope contained a train ticket to New York. Price's a ticket to Los Angeles. Hines explained the terms. Travel to these cities and don't come back to St. Louis until you have built respectable careers in your chosen field of theater. The two young men left from Union Station the next morning on trains headed in opposite directions. Orson Welles and Vincent Price enjoyed fleeting moments of glory in the bright lights of New York and Los Angeles, and then gradually sank into obscurity. They never returned to St. Louis. But their legend grew in the Seven Wonders neighborhood. A few nights after they left, some bored teenagers on North 20th Street near the statue of Zeus turned on a hose and soaked everyone they could with streams of water. Word spread quickly, and the block became the scene of a riotous party. How hose parties became a regular occurrence around the neighborhood for the rest of the summer. Adults joined in the fun until no one was left dry. Dignified pedestrians were tempting targets. After getting soaked, they often picked up the hose and sprayed back, much to the delight of the partygoers. Motorists got angry when their freshly waxed cars were drenched and were sprayed again when they rolled down the windows to complain. The defenders of public order harumphed at this hooliganism, but to no avail. Young people from other parts of the city started coming to Seven Wonders to get in on the fun. Leonora opened another bottle of wine and told the rest of the story. 1941 was a brutally hot summer, and also the 10-year anniversary of the CSP. J. Whittemore Hines ordered the fire department to open the hydrants of Seven Wonders every Saturday. The newly sanctioned celebrations took off. Streetcars coming up Grand Avenue were filled with people wearing bathing attire, impromptu marching bands playing tubas, trumpets, and trombones, all water-resistant instruments, led revelers through the spray. And in subsequent years, the official celebration, now called the Water Festival, was limited to one weekend a summer. In 1945, Heinz himself joined in. He rode atop a fire engine, waving and tossing water balloons to the cheering crowd. It was a brilliant political move. His appearance became a tradition, continued by his successors to the present day. The Water Festival got its biggest boost with the 1958 release of the hit movie Meet Me at the Hydraulic. It was the story of a doomed affair between a demure debutante from an elite family and a dashing young poet who lived in Seven Wonders. The pivotal scene where the lovers are forced apart forever, they think, was filmed on location at the Water Festival. The dramatic kiss takes place amidst a frenzy of brass bands, ecstatic celebrants, and torrents of water. Audiences around the world were captivated, and before long, thousands of visitors descended on Seven Wonders every summer to get a glimpse of the magic of euphoria. Awesome, said Lisa. It sounds like Mardi Gras on steroids, and it's coming up soon. Count me in. That's the mythology episode. So, well, here we are. That's what that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. But I'd love to hear your thoughts, your comments, your questions. Say whatever you want. Robert.
Yeah, well, I just want to say, it was great to hear you reading it, because, for me to read it, I'm hearing it without so much, emotion and interest and stuff, but to hear you read it as you wrote it, was really another gift. Thank you.
Okay.
Oh.
All right. Charlie.
I think I've read both books, and your account of HD and it's so believable. I wanted to get in my car and drive to South Grand and start looking for the membrane so that I could go across and experience it for myself. I just thought it was so
Me too.
fun.
Hey, I know.
And it just so happened that while I was reading book one about the bricks that generate electricity, I read an article in the New York Times about bricks that generate electricity. So suddenly the line between fiction and nonfiction started to get a little blurry.
Well, and that story about some of that research about bricks using it more for electricity storage, I thought than generation. But the research been done in Washington, right here.
Yeah. So just a question about, first of all, I want to know where I can buy the pills that will take me over there.
Well, you come see me afterwards.
But I thought the way you treated the Cahokians and Native Americans was really great. And towards the end, not to give anything away, you mentioned mounds in other states. I was just curious as to whether those are.
Oh, those are all very real.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, the Mississippian culture, of which Cahokia was one of the leading centers, really had locations all across from like Arkansas, Louisiana, Ohio, Alabama, Georgia. There are many of these places. Cahokia is the largest. It's one of
And they're still there.
And they're all still there. Yeah, mostly still there. And so, yes, I particularly write about a particular one in Louisiana towards the end of the book. So you have to read the whole damn book to find out what that is. Yes.
You, speaking of the mounds in other cities and the like, are you placing a nugget for another sequel to this?
Oh, gee, I don't know. There's a little bit of a
Yes.
at the end of Disrupted. There's a little teeny door open slightly. So and Becky and I spent a lot of time talking about this. And I know you're supposed to write a trilogy, right? So I sort of have promised myself, and I guess I'm promising you guys, that I'm going to do it. Though at this point, I'm in extremely early stage. I've spent a little time sort of brainstorming stuff, but I really still have no clue what the third book is what's gonna happen in the third book.
It's
So,
fantastic.
well, she likes the idea, but I've got a sort of jumble of disjointed ideas, you know. And I'm not quite sure how to put it all together, and they may not be the right ones. But someday I will do that, and then I'll probably be done with HG. Yeah, Gene.
So about that neighborhood where the water tower is on North Grand,
Uh-huh.
that is one of 4 neighborhoods, College Hill, Walnut Park, Wells Goodfellow, and Baden, where there was a lot of property bought out maybe 10 years ago by MSD because of flooding. And the
Uh-huh.
idea, and the buildings taken down, the buildings deconstructed. And the process in all that was kind of extraordinary in that instead of a bunch of white people coming from MSD and saying to that primarily black part of the community, well, we're gonna do such and such for you. The question was, what would you like from green space here? Because that's what you're gonna get. We're not gonna have more buildings. We're gonna have green space to absorb stormwater.
Okay.
And Peace Park, which is an idea that was developed by Otis Woodard
Uh-huh.
of KDHX,
I know
longtime
Otis Woodard
host of the
well.
morning show,
Yeah.
who had his place up there, his charity
Yeah, I
distribution,
think
and
I
he
was
lived
there
up
once.
there.
Yeah.
Peace Park is in process of being developed, and ground would have been broken for that this summer. There's some, I don't know exactly what the development difficulties are,
Okay.
but there is action happening in that very area. I don't know about fire hydrants.
You know, for my taste, there's too much vacant land up there. I mean, it doesn't feel like it's a city anymore up there. And I think that's a problem. You know, and I also understand a lot of the buildings, the old 19th century brick homes and street after street of them that are gone. They were kind of destroyed, and it's in the Brick by Chance or Fortune documentary, which you were mentioning. That it was sort of destroyed on purpose and strip mined for the bricks, which were hauled away and sold down in Texas and other places to new construction. I mean, there was a lot of that. It was St. Louis is being, this back in like the 80s. St. Louis was being kind of strip mined, particularly North St. Louis is being strip mined for bricks. And that's why so much of it, that's part of why so much of it was lost. So, but I'm glad something good's going on there. I mean, it's kind of weird to go there now because this incredible tower and there's like like there's nothing anywhere around it.
I don't think they'll have a Colossus of Rhodes because he was a white guy.
Well, you'll have to read about one seven. Well, you've actually read it, Gene. I know 7 Olympics, but yeah, who knows? Well, who knows who the Colossus of Rhodes was? He was a mythical character. He could be anything. So, I want to shout out to somebody. One other person who just walked up is Andy Coco,
Hi, everybody.
Andy, woo.
produced and is with Gene, the co-narrator of the audiobook. And for the Universalized Travel, and Andy is producing, and we are in the extremely late stages of editing the audiobook for Disrupted. So that's, I'm hoping it will be available in 2-3 weeks, on the places you can get audiobooks. And we make sure it goes up everywhere, not just all the other ones too. You can get it. And places you can get it through your library and stuff like that. So Andy's great. And frankly, Andy's doing this out of the very large goodness of his heart. We've got a deal, but I mean, Andy came to me having read Universalized Travel and said, "Do you have an audiobook?" I went, "No, I can't afford to do an audiobook." And he said, "Let's talk." So that's why that audiobook exists. Any more questions? I was expecting a lot of questions.
Read the book first.
Well,
How much time do you spend writing?
okay. That's a good one. I am the most undisciplined writer you can imagine. So I tend to do it in spurts. I mostly like to write in the morning. And some days I'll write 3-4 hours. Some days I'll write half an hour. Some days I won't write at all. Because I'm not good at plot is not my forte. So it sort of comes to me and piece over here, and then I get an idea over here, and then eventually I kind of start seeing how it can all fit together. So it's kind of a very meandering process. I get a lot of my best ideas. Becky can attest to this. When I go ride my bike, which I usually do in the afternoons, and I'll be riding for an hour and a half, and things will happen when I do that. I mean, I'll go, oh yeah. And I come back and want to write it down.
How about rewrites?
What?
Rewrites.
Well, I've done a fair amount of rewriting. I mean, I've written a lot of stuff that I had originally in drafts of these books and then took it out because it didn't fit. I realized no good. I tried to make it better. I think I need to do more rewriting. I would like to do more. In doing this today, getting ready for this, I go, man, why did I, wrong word here, change this. Why did I have that? So I think in the future, I really want to, when I do the last one, and I had a friend in California who said, well, Eric, when I think about your last book, and I went, no, Mario, what do you think? He says, it's got to be the best one. Oh shit, thanks for telling me that. But he was right. And so I need to rewrite more. Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about publishing, how you found your publisher and
Well,
are you putting a platform? You have
well, a little bit about that. I mean, this second one is totally self-published. We worked with a woman who had kind of a one-person publishing outfit to help me do the first one. And because I had no idea what to do. Becky had no idea what to do. And then she has subsequently kind of gotten out of the business. And so I got the rights, she said, well, I said, Marcia, come on. I'm doing this, you're not doing it. So I learned from her, but I also learned, and I've heard this from people who work with big publishing houses, you still got to do all the publicity yourself, which is the part, frankly, not my favorite, but that's what you got to do. So this one is totally me, totally self-published. And, the mechanics of it is so easy now. You can pay someone to, lay the book out and all that, and do the cover. Though I had to come up with the concepts for the cover, but whatever. And then, it's most books. I hate to say it, most people buy ebooks. So even though most of the books sold are ebooks, but on paperbacks, it's now all the technology for the big places like Ingram, which is the big global distributor. It's all print on demand. You don't have to say, well, I need 1,000, or I'm stuck with them if I can't sell them. Price is the same if you order one, order 100. Price per copy. They'll print and ship it to you.
Wow.
So that's really cool. Because I know people, Robert being one, and my brother who wrote a book about fishing like 25 years ago or 30 years ago, and had stacks of books in his closet. I still got a couple, but you don't have to do that anymore. So that really helps. But the trick is getting noticed, frankly. And the fact that I've had a place like Left Bank help me here in St. Louis, and a good kind of community in St. Louis. Because frankly, let's face it, the sort of alternate parallel universe fantasy about St. Louis, I kind of got the market cornered. No one's come along yet trying to do the same thing. So, and maybe that says something in and of itself that nobody else wants to do it. But, so that's been really great because I've probably sold 80% of my books in the St. Louis market. It used to be one of the sites that tells you how many books you sold. Paperbacks only, different for ebooks. Used to have a feature where you could look at it by map and see how many in each metropolitan area. But then last winter they stopped having that. So I used to know. That's how I know that on the first book I was selling probably 80% in St. Louis area, which didn't surprise me. But now I have no visibility into that. Other than what sold say through.
How many copies have you sold, both ebooks and paper, the first one?
It's a rough guess because some of the reporting is bad, but I'd say 800, certainly 800, maybe 900. I'm going to try to figure out someday if I get to 1,000.
That's both versions.
That's only the first book. The second one.
No, but I mean that's ebooks and print.
Yeah, right. I sold about including what I've sold through here, probably 600 plus on print. But the ebook reporting I was getting before was so crappy, I could never really tell, and I didn't believe it. Because I noticed over the last few months, I'm selling a lot more, doing it myself. I sell a lot more ebooks. I mean, like 10 times a day. And I'm not selling that huge numbers right now, but it's, I'll sell 20 ebooks in a month and 2 paperbacks. So out in the big wide world. So, but I think I've sold, I tell myself 800, 900 total. And libraries buy them and stuff. People pass them around. And, so I don't have that many friends. Let's put it that way. Yes, Scott.
So Eric, how do you, what's the publicity plan? Or what do you do?
That's a really good question. Facebook. I do advertise on Amazon. I can't, that doesn't really work for me yet. Trying to get media, getting really hard to get media attention. I have my mailing list now, and I've got 350 people on that. Part of the way you get on the mailing, you get people on your mailing list, you give away some free copies of the ebook in return for them writing a review, which some of them actually do, some of them never do. But there are people I would never reach in any other format. I would never find, they're like in England and stuff. I mean, they're never going to hear about my book. And some of those people like it. I mean, I get nice emails from people, I get nice reviews. Sometimes I also get, it's really great. I get emails from people I don't know a couple times a month, which is really fun. I mean, that's why I do it. It's not a commercial venture,
I think that's it, isn't it?
Yeah.
You do it because you love it.
Well, yeah, I'm having fun with it, and I hope you guys are, and everybody who reads it is having fun, and kind of.
Netflix.
What?
Netflix.
Oh yeah. People always say, you make a great series. Yeah, I said, well, I'm with you. That's pretty hard to do too. I mean, remember, about 1 million books are published every year in the United States. So hard to get noticed. I mean, it's easy to do, so everybody does it. So that's it. Yeah, Evan, I think we're run out of time.
Yep,
Right?
I think it's about that time. So thank you so much again.
Okay.
Let's give another. Thank you so much. We'll go ahead and be signing books in the back here. If you haven't bought yours yet, go do that at the front desk, and we will get ourselves set up.
I brought my really good pen.
Yeah, no, did try something.
Okay.
Yeah, that was. I figured that was sort of an accident waiting to happen there. So your mom's doing well? She's doing pretty well, yeah. Oh, yeah. She's doing well. Well, it was, something was coming up about. Yeah. I know they got all the people every night. It's kind of a little foggy tonight. And it takes 3 days to drive. Oh, wow.
Okay.
I'm ready.
All right, I've got some. Do you need a pen?
Hey, Robin.
Hey, good job.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah, no, it worked out. It turned out she didn't go.
So she was tired anyway, and it kind of works out and stuff. What I want to know was who has sort of a lottery to select a real life person.
Yeah, right.
Who was that?
It was well, actually, the Indian lawyer. His name's Stan Huffman, it was won by a guy who was my neighbor.
Oh, okay. Oh, really?
And,
That's cool.
I had actually already named the character Stan, thinking of him, and then he won lottery. I said, "Great, I'll give him the same last name." So
That's funny.
That was
That's funny.
Yeah.
You're heading to the back?
Oh yeah. I'll see you Monday. Oh yeah. Okay.
Hey, Charlie, Robin Starr.
Oh my God.
How's it going? Good to see you.
How are you? Friend.
Yeah, thanks to yours. You invited me out.
Oh,
Thank you. Remember that?
Way back when.
Oh, yes. T-shirts. It said Yahoo Wahoo.
It's gonna be kind of in the back corner where he's signing. I can sneak through there and meet you guys.
That's cool.
I'll have to grab, it's the pink door.
Oh, the pink door?
So I'll have to grab the key and I'll be right back.
Oh, you got your key.
Yeah, keep the lock, so I'll go grab that for you.
I think I saw you at Big Sandwich.
And how have you been? Good?
Yeah, pretty good.
Still vertical?
I'm working on about 8 hours a day.
Are you writing? Or is that next to your?
No, I didn't. Once
Oh,
you
that's
remove
good.
my vehicle.
All right,
Yeah, take it.
glad we saw
Good to see you.
Okay, here's the key for it.
Okay, where do you want me to bring it back?
Just at the desk, or yeah, if you want, just set it on the green table.